Imagine draining your hard-earned life savings for the ultimate American pickup truck, only to discover you just bought a dangerously fragile, overpriced death trap. For decades, Detroit has relentlessly brainwashed us with slogans like "Built Ford tough and solid like a rock." But behind those million-dollar commercials lies a horrifying truth they desperately want to bury. Today, we are exposing the absolute worst pickup trucks in American history. These are not just ugly vehicles, they are catastrophic engineering failures that shattered like cheap glass, humiliated their owners, and literally rolled over on the highway. You will not believe the terrifying disaster waiting at our number 10 spot, so you absolutely must watch until the very end. Hit that subscribe button right now and let the roasting begin. Kicking off our list at number 1 is the Dodge Rampage, produced from 1982 to 1984. If you ever wanted to look up the exact definition of an identity crisis in the automotive dictionary, you would find a picture of this confusing contraption. Built on Chrysler's front-wheel drive L-body platform, the exact same architecture used for the incredibly boring Dodge Omni compact car, the Rampage was essentially a cheap economy hatchback playing dress-up in a truck costume. Chrysler thought Americans wanted a fuel-efficient mini-ute, completely forgetting that a truck actually needs to do truck stuff. The real tragedy of the Rampage was what lurked under the hood. It was powered by a notorious 2.2-liter engine, pumping out a completely laughable 84 horsepower. Dodge boldly claimed this unibody monstrosity had a 1,000-pound payload capacity. But if you actually put 1,000 pounds of dirt in the bed, the front-wheel drive layout meant the front tires would completely lose traction. You would be left spinning your wheels helplessly in the parking lot, struggling to move at even 5 miles per hour. It was the absolute epitome of all bark and zero bite. Financially, it was not a massive bank breaker to buy, but the buyer's remorse hit incredibly hard the very first time an owner tried to haul a simple piece of plywood and realized it simply did not fit. The Rampage survived for only 3 pitiful model years before Dodge mercifully pulled the plug, realizing American buyers wanted actual trucks, not hatchbacks with the roof chopped off. It became a laughingstock of the decade. But hey, if you thought a front-wheel drive, underpowered pseudo-truck was bad, wait until you see the bloated 70s boat we have next. Coming in at number 2 is the Ford Ranchero, but we are taking aim specifically at the bloated smog-era disasters from the mid to late 1970s. By 1977, the Ranchero had mutated from a sleek utility coupe into a massive, heavy land yacht based on the Ford LTD2 platform. It was a staggering 220 inches long with a front overhang so massive it had its own zip code. Ford tried to market it as the perfect blend of luxury and utility, but created a compromised behemoth that failed spectacularly at both. Performance. In these late 70s, Rancheros was an absolute joke. You could get it with a massive engine that somehow managed to choke out a pathetic 173 horsepower. Imagine driving a vehicle that weighs over 4,000 pounds, powered by an engine that could not outrun a modern lawnmower. Getting up to 60 miles per hour felt like it took an entire week, all while getting a horrific 10 miles to the gallon. It was the ultimate financial burn at the gas pump. The suspension was terribly soft, making corners feel terrifyingly vague. Ultimately, the 70s Ranchero was bought by people who wanted the image of a rugged outdoorsman but never actually left the paved roads of suburbia. It was too nice to scratch up with farm equipment, yet too bizarre to take on a fancy date. Ford finally killed the Ranchero in 1979, ending its misery as buyers flocked to proper pickup trucks. The Ranchero was heavy and painfully slow, but our next truck on the list literally dissolved into rust before your very eyes, making it a complete nightmare to own. At number 3, we have the International Harvester Terra, produced from 1976 to 1980. International Harvester built legendary, indestructible farm equipment, so you would think their pickup trucks would be completely bulletproof, right? Wrong. The Terra was pitched as a rugged, go-anywhere mid-sized truck featuring a unique fiberglass half-cab top. However, the grim reality of owning a Terra was a terrifying battle against the elements that owners almost always lost. It was a nightmare of sluggish performance, poor build quality, and a rapid decay that broke the hearts of rural American buyers. The absolute biggest flaw of the Terra was its legendary susceptibility to rust. If you lived anywhere near the Salt Belt states, the steel would begin to disintegrate practically on the showroom floor. It was not uncommon for a 3-year-old Terra to have massive holes in the floorboards. Under the hood, the engine struggled to move the heavy 4,200-pound curb weight. Pressing the gas pedal was a suggestion rather than a command, meaning merging onto a highway at 65 miles per hour was a daily life-or-death gamble for the incredibly frustrated driver. To make matters significantly worse, that unique fiberglass half-cab top was notorious for leaking heavily in the rain. This ensured the interior was always damp, which only accelerated the severe rusting process from the inside out. It was a truck that demanded constant, expensive maintenance just to keep it in one piece. International Harvester eventually abandoned passenger vehicles entirely. Rust is a terrible enemy that eats your wallet, but what happens when an American manufacturer intentionally robs you of your usable cargo space just to look a little bit retro? Let us find out. Number 4 brings us to a design trend from the 1990s, specifically looking at the Ford F-150 Flareside. The standard F-150 is a legendary workhorse, but the Flareside bed option was the ultimate triumph of bizarre styling over actual practical utility. Instead of giving you a massive, flat, highly usable cargo box, Ford pinched the bed inward and slapped on bulging fiberglass fenders to give it a sporty stepside look. It was a truck designed for people who cared more about checking their reflection in store windows than hauling actual sheets of drywall. By choosing the Flareside option, you were voluntarily sacrificing nearly 20% of your usable cargo volume. You could not lay standard construction materials flat, and the weird interior dimensions made it incredibly frustrating to pack efficiently. Furthermore, those bulging fiberglass fenders were incredibly vulnerable. If you sideswiped a pole while backing up at 10 miles per hour, a steel bed could be banged out. A fiberglass Flareside fender would instantly shatter, leading to incredibly expensive repair bills. It was the textbook definition of a mall crawler, totally useless on a real job site. The financial burn here was purely self-inflicted. Buyers willingly paid a premium for the Flareside styling package, only to realize months later that their expensive pickup was utterly useless for helping a friend move furniture. Ford eventually phased out the Flareside entirely as consumers finally woke up and realized that sacrificing bed space completely defeats the purpose of owning a pickup truck. Sacrificing valuable cargo space for subjective style is definitely annoying, but our next contender completely gave up on styling altogether, ending up looking exactly like Dr. Frankenstein's monster. Enter number 5, the Studebaker Champ, built from 1960 to 1964. By the late 1950s, the Studebaker Corporation was rapidly running out of money and desperately needed a new pickup truck. Having absolutely zero budget to design a new cab, they found a brilliant cost-cutting solution. They took the front half of their compact passenger car, chopped it off behind the front seats, and violently welded it onto an antiquated truck chassis that weighed nearly 3,500 pounds. The result was an incredibly awkward, mismatched, and downright ugly vehicle. The visual proportions of the Champ were an absolute disaster. The delicate styling of a compact sedan crashed abruptly into the harsh, squared-off lines of a rugged truck bed. The cab was much narrower than the bed, making it look incredibly bizarre from every single angle. The interior was severely cramped, and the ride quality was bone-jarring. You were sitting in a lightweight car cab bolted directly to a stiff, unyielding commercial truck frame. Hitting a simple pothole at 30 miles per hour felt like getting violently kicked in the lower back. While you have to respect Studebaker's desperate attempt to survive on a shoestring budget, the Champ was a massive commercial failure. Buyers walked right past Studebaker dealerships and bought cohesive, purpose-built trucks from Chevy and Ford instead. The Champ could not save the company, and Studebaker eventually collapsed entirely. It remains a bizarre piece of history, proving you cannot just glue two random vehicles together to save cash. Ugly and cheap is bad, but paying massive luxury car prices to haul absolutely nothing. Enter our next incredibly expensive disaster. Number 6 is the legendary flop known as the Lincoln Blackwood, released for a single miserable model year in 2002. This was Ford's attempt to create the ultimate luxury pickup truck. But what they actually created was the most useless, expensive vehicle in automotive history. Lincoln took the front clip of a Navigator SUV, slapped it onto a crew cab, and completely ruined the truck bed. The Blackwood did not have a normal bed. It had a trunk featuring a permanent power-operated tonneau cover. You could not carry anything tall. The absurdity goes much deeper. The inside of this useless bed was lined with plush carpeting, while the exterior was covered in fake photorealistic African weng wood decals. Yes, fake wood stickers on a truck that weighed 5,700 pounds and cost over $52,000 in 2002 money. It was the equivalent of wearing a $5,000 tuxedo to a mud wrestling match. You could not put dirt, gravel, or construction materials in the back without completely ruining the luxury carpet. It failed miserably at being a truck. The buyer's remorse for the poor souls who purchased a Blackwood was catastrophic. They paid a massive premium for a truck that was mocked by actual truck owners and ignored by luxury car buyers. Lincoln aimed to sell 18,000 units but barely managed to push a fraction of that off the lot before violently pulling the plug after just 1 year. It is widely considered a massive marketing misstep. The Blackwood was a luxury fail, but Chevrolet looked at that disaster and decided to answer back with a midlife crisis convertible. Rolling in at number 7 is the infamous Chevrolet SSR, produced from 2003 to 2006. Born during a massive retro styling craze, Chevy wanted to create a vehicle that looked like a classic 1940s truck, but with a retractable hardtop convertible roof. It sounded cool on paper, but the execution was an absolute train wreck. Built on a heavy SUV chassis, the SSR weighed a staggering 4,700 pounds. It was meant to be a high-performance hot rod, but it was dangerously overweight and wildly impractical. Because of the massive weight, this supersport truck was laughably slow at launch, struggling to reach 60 miles per hour before getting beaten off the line by standard family sedans. It handled terribly, suffered from severe chassis cowl shake due to the heavy convertible top, and had a completely useless shallow bed. And then there was the price. The SSR launched with a sticker price soaring over $42,000 for a vehicle that failed as a sports car, failed as a convertible, and utterly failed as a pickup truck. Depreciation hit these vehicles like a runaway freight train, causing severe financial pain to early adopters. Buyers quickly realized it was vastly overpriced and highly impractical for daily driving. Production quietly ended as it faded into automotive obscurity, remembered only as a bloated, cartoonish mistake driven by impulse buyers experiencing a midlife crisis. Chevy chased retro styling and failed miserably, but Dodge actually did it decades earlier by literally bolting ridiculous passenger car parts directly onto a standard, hard-working commercial truck. Let us look at that disaster next. Taking the number 8 spot is the Dodge Sweptside, built from 1957 to 1959. Back in the fabulous 50s, tail fins on passenger cars were absolutely everything. Dodge dealers were panicking because they had nothing to compete with stylish new trucks on the market. So Dodge executives walked down to the assembly line, grabbed the massive sweeping fiberglass tail fins off a 2-door station wagon, and literally bolted them onto the side of their standard utilitarian pickup truck bed. They added a 2-tone paint job and called it the Sweptside. It was the ultimate fake-it-till-you-make-it design. The Sweptside was hand-assembled because the station wagon fins did not naturally fit the truck bed. The integration was clumsy, resulting in a vehicle that weighed around 3,800 pounds but looked incredibly bizarre from certain angles. It suffered from a severe identity crisis. It was far too fancy and fragile for construction workers to actually use on a job site, but it was still just a bumpy, unrefined farm truck underneath, meaning city folks hated driving it. Because it was practically hand-built and featured so much extra bodywork, the Sweptside was significantly more expensive than a standard Dodge truck. Buyers simply were not willing to pay a massive premium just to have station wagon fins awkwardly bolted to their workhorse. Dodge sold very few of them before quietly discontinuing the model, realizing that mashing two different vehicle concepts together rarely works. Bolting on massive tail fins was definitely ridiculous, but our number 9 spot features a truck bed made of materials so incredibly fragile it shattered under pressure. Coming in at number 9 is the vehicle that actually inspired Dodge's panic, the Chevrolet Cameo carrier produced from 1955 to 1958. Chevrolet wanted to build a gentleman's pickup, smoothing out the traditional step-side truck bed to give it a sleek, flush appearance. To achieve this aesthetic without spending millions on new steel tooling, they attached fiberglass outer panels to the sides of a standard steel bed. The truck weighed around 3,400 pounds and looked absolutely beautiful, but it turned it into a delicate flower. The fiberglass panels were incredibly fragile. If a farmer accidentally dropped a heavy tool against the side, or if a load of lumber shifted while braking at 40 miles per hour, the fiberglass would not just dent like regular steel, it would violently crack, splinter, and shatter into pieces. Repairing custom fiberglass in the 1950s was highly specialized and incredibly expensive. The truck was supposed to be a daily workhorse, but owners were utterly terrified to actually put heavy cargo in the back, completely defeating the purpose of owning it. Furthermore, the Cameo carrier was priced nearly 30% higher than a standard Chevy half-ton truck. That was a massive financial hurdle for buyers of that era. Working-class Americans looked at the fragile fiberglass bed and the inflated price tag and said no thanks, opting for standard solid steel trucks instead. It was an aesthetic triumph but a functional nightmare. Having a fragile bed is extremely expensive and annoying, but our final truck on this list goes way beyond bad design. It was actually a downright dangerous death trap. Taking the final most disgraceful spot at number 10 is the Ford Bronco II, produced from 1984 to 1990. While technically classified as a compact SUV, the Bronco II was built directly on the Ford Ranger pickup truck chassis. It weighed around 3,200 pounds and was designed to compete with the Chevy Blazer. But instead of just being ugly or underpowered, the Bronco II was a terrifying rolling death trap. Ford's engineers made a fatal miscalculation regarding the high center of gravity and narrow track width. This geometric disaster meant that the Bronco II had a horrifying tendency to roll over during evasive maneuvers. If you swerved suddenly to avoid a deer or took a highway off-ramp at 55 miles per hour, the vehicle would violently tip onto two wheels and flip over entirely. The rollover situation was so bad that the government launched official safety investigations. Internal Ford documents surfaced during massive lawsuits, revealing that engineers knew about the rollover risks before production, but executives allegedly pushed it to market anyway to meet strict deadlines. The financial and human cost of the Bronco II was absolutely staggering. Ford paid out hundreds of millions of dollars in lawsuit settlements. Buying a Bronco II was not just a case of buyer's remorse, it was putting your family in extreme danger every time you turned the ignition key. It completely ruined the reputation of compact Ford SUVs until the Explorer replaced it. The Bronco II proves that the absolute worst trucks fundamentally fail at keeping drivers safe. Would you ever dare get behind the wheel of one? So, there you have it, the ultimate Hall of Shame, the top 10 worst pickup trucks in American history. From the fiberglass-shattering Chevy Cameo to the outrageously expensive Lincoln Blackwood and the terrifying rollover risks of the Bronco II, these trucks prove that automakers can make colossal mistakes. Which of these disasters do you think is the worst? Sound off in the comments below. Do not forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more deep dives into automotive history. See you next time.